What happened on this farm was never meant to be told. On April 2nd, 1989, my mama died in her sleep. She was 82 years old. My brother Benji found her lying on her back with her eyes closed. I found Benji screaming, hunched over her cold body and slapping her corpse. Big fat tears running out his wide eyes as he pleaded with her to wake up. I calmed him down, told him I'd call the doc, and sent him to wait in his garden. The barn needed cleaning, so after the call, I worked while I waited. It rained the day we buried her, like something out of a movie. A dull gray rain that lingered and made you feel wet even beneath your umbrella. Benji's tears were all spent by then, though. He'd done his crying before the rains, where everyone could see it. He didn't talk for 12 days straight after that, like back when he was a little. On the evening of the 12th day, he up and told me he was going to clean the barn tomorrow. When I got up the next day, I found him swinging from the rafters. I'd stepped outside for my morning coffee and a cigarette and saw that the barn doors were still open. I crossed the small yard that lay between the farmhouse and barn, passing Benji's garden along the way. He'd just planted a few days before Mama passed, and already growth was overtaking the small plot. For all his faults, at least he'd had a green thumb.
What happened on this farm was never meant to be told. Part 2. The barn smelled of hay and dry dung and old timber. The wood came from the forests that once grew around the property. Our family had long since cut and sold all the timber. Starting all the way back when Grandpa acquired the land, we were some of the first to settle in these parts. And the barn was likely one of the oldest ones in the state. The wood from the forest was good and stiff, as sturdy as a man could ask for. Benji's body was stiff as a board when I cut him down. He landed in the hay. It sounded like a bag of flour, a low, dull thud. He kicked up dust when he landed, dust that caught the morning light passing through the open barn doors. I sneezed as I climbed down the ladder and inhaled the dust. It got in my eyes and made them water. The dust made me cry. I poured whiskey in my coffee as I waited for the ambulance to arrive. I waited for a good long while. Our property was way out in the boonies. Technically, it all passed to Benji when Mama died. It's just mine now. Lily pawed at my knee as I sat waiting on the porch. She whimpered and stretched her jaw into a wide yawn. Her canines were sharp and yellow. Benji's teeth never did come in right. What happened on this farm was never meant to be told. Part 3. The ambulance pulled up the dirt road and passed the welcome to Oakridge Farm's sign Benji and I had painted when we were children. I kept my hands in my jacket as the men approached. The responder wore his navy blues, and he had a lip swollen full with tobacco. His partner looked nervous. We spoke for a moment, then I led them into the barn. "Why'd you cut him down?" the lead asked. His name was Rick, and I took him for the lead cause there was no way in hell the other guy was in charge. "Couldn't stand to leave him up there any longer," I said. "You really shouldn't have moved him. The police will say it looks fishy." I shrugged my shoulders at that. It was far too late to worry about how it all looked. I stepped back outside for some air while the boys called for the me. About 2 hours later, I said goodbye to the me as he drove off with my brother's body. The police had their questions, sure, but I'd been drinking buddies with the chief for years. He knew me, he knew Mama, but most importantly, he knew Benji. "Damn shame," he'd said shortly after entering the barn. What happened on this farm was never meant to be told. Part 4. My mind was on the cattle out in the pasture and the wheat growing in the fields. It was almost time for harvest. I had things to get done. He show any signs? Ever tell you what was on his mind? I shook my head no. All he said was that he was going to go clean the barn in the morning. It was the first and last thing he'd said since Mama died. The chief sighed and shook his head. "Damn shame." I walked the chief out to his car. He rolled his window down before driving off. "I know you're going through a lot right now. Just take some time. Swing by in a few days, and we'll get the paperwork squared away. I'll go ahead and let the county clerk know you'll be by soon. For the property transfer and the dissolution of that, What was it called again? Conservatorship, I said quietly. I'll be up later, get it taken care of. Right, you take care now. I watched the chief pull away, spiraled into thin clouds before settling. In the grass on the sides of the road. He'd had a look in his eye, hadn't he? A queer one. The kind of look you give a thug or an out-of-towner. Not a man who's driven you home countless times after one too many. No, I must have imagined it. I stayed outside a moment, pacing the gravel, hands laced behind my head, thinking, ignoring the sting of sweat on my rope-burnt palms. I could handle the wheat. I could handle the cattle. But what I couldn't handle, what no one could handle, was the garden. It seemed to grow with a mind of its own, spreading every year. No matter how often I fixed the fence or trimmed the plants, Patty didn't think much of it. In fact, she enjoyed the garden and its bounty. Looks like Benji's still helping out from beyond the grave, huh, hun? She'd say with a smile. I sure do wish I could have met him. He sounds like such a kind soul. I'd nod my head, but inside I knew something was wrong. The tomatoes burst in my mouth like pimples. The cucumbers cracked like bone. I couldn't eat any of it. I couldn't eat. Patty prided herself on preparing, for each meal, only what the Lord had blessed our farm with. She scolded me when she found grease stains on my shirt, or empty bags and cups in my work truck. The fast stuff was all I could eat, all I could keep down. The worst came a year after Benji's death, on his anniversary. I'd stepped outside to eject the meal Patty had made. I had to, otherwise it would curdle in my stomach. She didn't know any of this. God, she didn't deserve any of this. I'd barely made it out the door and leaned over the porch railing. I vomited right on top of Benji's grave. It was then I noticed the roses. They were magnificent. Large flowers of deep lavender grew all across the garden. They grew as I watched, their petals blossoming, their thorns stretching longer and longer. I threw up again and again. Their smell, their stench, was overwhelming. Like a field hit with blight. Like a dead cow left to rot beneath the sun. Like Benji's room when he'd have an accident, and in that moment, I waited for Benji. I knew he was coming. I knew I was about to pay for what I'd done. But damn it all, it was my farm. It was always supposed to be my farm. Why hadn't she trusted me? Of course I was going to take care of him. As if I'd abandoned my only brother. To do that to me, to strip away all I had worked for and give it to an imbecile. What was she thinking? What choice did she leave me? My tears mixed with the bile staining Benji's headstone as I waited for the roses to take me. I felt their petals lick my skin like the barbed tongue of the devil himself. Those thorns inched near the crown of my head, and I prepared myself to die a wicked man, damned by my wronged brother, beneath the eyes of a just God. Only death never came. He whispered from the bushes. His voice laughed in the wind, but he never showed his face. The roses retreated, the thorns scratching my skin as they went, but leaving me otherwise unharmed. Patty found me there in the morning. My clothes were soaked with sweat, and she said I was shivering like I'd been out in a winter storm. I still can't eat the food. I take no joy in the fruit of my labor, but I no longer care, because there was another voice that night apart from death, and it said, "I love you, Bubba."